Okay, welcome everybody to part two of our Impact Network book club. Paul is going to be the main driver today.
C'est moi.
Paul is with us, and Denise, and Lonnie is here. And welcome everybody else. Glad to see you. We'll go ahead and get started. Paul's bringing up our slides.
Yeah, did it come up?
Not yet.
Nope, not yet.
Oh, come on.
We just tested this, so it should work. There you go. It's
There you
coming.
go. It takes 2 clicks instead of 1. What do you know?
It's up.
Yes, it does.
Yes, well, whether you saw the first one or not, we're on the second part. This is chapter 4 of David Ehrlichman's book, Impact Networks. So we have some agreements we'd like for just behavioral rules. And Dawn, you want to go through that?
Sure. These are some agreements that we use ourselves as a team, and we like to share them with you because we think they help with the conversation and the interaction. So stay curious, ask for what you need, and offer what you can, which takes trust, right? And that's one of the main things that we like to do with these events is to start building trust between people. Please keep your camera on as a default. If you've got a good reason, we understand. Usually people chat that into the chat if they've, got having a bad hair day or whatever, but you are welcome to join us with your camera on. Share your thinking over your conclusions. We know that when you share your thinking, you will find more in common with others. We don't always get to the same conclusion with the same thinking. So share your thinking over your conclusions. Speak with intention and listen with attention. So speak to the point and listen to understand. Paul.
So we're going to go to a check-in here before we get into the chapter. And you can answer this verbally out loud, or you could do it in the chat. But why are you here? What drew you to this particular book club meeting?
You say type it in the chat or just speak up?
Speak right up.
Speak right up. I just met Denise yesterday and it was awesome. And so she said, come. So I came. I'm the new kid on the block. I'm still kind of figuring all this out, and it's phenomenal. I'm super excited to be part of it and to get to know everybody here. And yeah, so I'm just looking for access to meet more people and kind of get the hang of this whole community. So bring it on. I'll come to everything.
How excellent a response that is, because it points out that all of us are trying to invent an organization that none of us have ever existed in before.
Mhm.
We're all used to hierarchical structures, and we're trying to build a flat democratic one where anybody can be a leader. So you're right on time and right in the right place.
Nice.
I like Gregory's, I'm an impactivist.
Mhm.
And
I
I
like
admire anyone named Belize because it's such a nice country named after her or him.
And Grace, no problem if you don't know about the book itself yet. We'll guide you through.
Absolutely.
Well, let's go into the chapter then. Yeah, thanks, Virgil. I got that. So, part 2. Part 1, we covered the introduction in the first 3 chapters of David's book. That's our playbook for HRC. That's how we plan to develop the network of networks. Today, we're covering network leadership. And don't forget, there is a 3-part book club. So we're going to make not only a recording of this, but we'll have an AI summary as well posted. The final session, we'll have the author attending. So don't miss that one on November 13th. Network leadership is rooted in trust, collaboration, and shared power. I've made this extremely concise. So that's several pages boiled down to a bullet point. Leadership should be adaptive, facilitative, and grounded in living systems. Hierarchical structures are dead. They're not living systems by and large, but this one is going to be, because it has to learn and adapt and change, and that's part of its DNA. And because of that, there's distributed leadership. Anybody can lead. All you have to do is step up. Or as I like, I'm a doctor, so in leadership and with physicians, everyone else steps back. And that's how you get into a leadership position. The roles of leaders in networks are to catalyze, which means crafting a vision and inspiring action. To facilitate, which is what we're doing today, the four of us here from HRC are guiding a group process and trying to find common ground for collaboration. We're also weaving, and anyone can weave. You do that by fostering connections. You meet somebody, you show up. Thank you, Jeff. And then you come again, and someone else from your organization shows up, and now you're building a wide bridge. A narrow bridge is one person. If they decide not to go anymore, the whole bridge is broken. When you have two or more people, you have a wide bridge between you and between your organization and another organization. So we try to build robust, redundant connections. And what else do leaders do? They coordinate. They organize the network's internal systems and structures. And we at HRC, we're doing that, but it's under construction. It's a fairly slow process. We're just getting off the ground. This organization has only been around for what, 14, 15 months, 16 months. And where we will be 16 months from now will be a universe away from where we are now.
Mhm.
Whoop, too many clicks. The principles of leadership in networks are to foster self-organization, not to create a hierarchical domain with a pyramid, but to create a living system with distributed leadership. And if I'm being redundant, that's good because redundancy is innate to the organization. We want to promote emergence. That means that our strategy is deliberate, but we don't know what the outcome is going to be. And emergent outcomes mean something that no one expected. So we prioritize connection, experimenting, iterating, sensing the direction of the organization and adapting to that change in direction, embracing change as innate to the network, and developing resilience by decentralizing the connections, allowing everybody in the network to connect with anybody else in the network at their will and at their whim, and create redundancies, those wide bridges between people. Then there's tension. There's always tension. There's our humans, so humans always have tension. There's a tension between building trust and taking action. Some people want to act yesterday. Some people won't act until they build some trust. Some folks won't even speak up until you invite them to speak because they're used to being shut down and ignored. There's a tension between pace and participation. If we go fast, you don't get a chance to participate. If we go slow, okay, but then we want to go faster. There's a tension between self and shared interest, and we are intensely focused on that. People come out of some sense of giving, but they also have to be taking. They have to get something out of it, not just give into it. This is not an altruistic episode. That doesn't sustain itself. It has to meet both altruistic goals and self-interest goals. And there's another tension between the parts and the whole. Each of us is a part. There is also a whole, and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But there's a tension between them. I want what I want. You want what you want. But what about us? What about we? And they're not all the same thing. And planning we have to do, but we have to expect the emergence of the unplanned and adapt to that rather than crushing it. And there's divergence where we go in different directions, but there's also convergence as we find common ground. And so we end up having to choose, but we don't want to choose either ors because usually the answer to an or question is yes or no. It's both and or either or, but it's a both and or neither one. So in building networks, trust is the work. The networks grow at the speed of trust, go slow now to go fast later is a quote from the book. Share your thinking, develop common language, evolve understandings, take collective action. People get to know each other, they trust each other. Once they trust each other, we can go fast. That's how it's working for us inside of HRC. I can take off for a few weeks and trust everybody else to do what I would do because we know each other and we trust each other. We have to learn to elicit self-interest and overcome the shame of doing something for myself. Altruism won't be enough. We have to attend to those parts and see how they can fit into the whole, balance our planning with emergence, loop back. Okay, this looping idea is new to me this year, but it comes through the two loops model, and it is in fact recursive. And guess what? So is machine learning, artificial intelligence, and the neural network inside your head is built out of recursive loops and synapses. So things loop back and reset, and that's how we learn. So it's a deliberate process with emergent results. I've said it 3 or 4 times. Common ground is convergence. We need to create space for disagreement too, and divergence, because the divergence allows for the convergence and leads to the emergence. That's how it works. That's how biology works. That's how living systems work. So, stepping into leadership. You're already more ready than you realize. You will never truly be ready if you're doing something worthwhile. Leadership is necessary. We said it above, to catalyze, to facilitate, to weave connections, to coordinate actions. And now, that's enough of all that. And I get to shut up because Dawn's going to lead us through the questions.
Great. So I just realized I don't have this open to copy those into the chat. Would you be able to do that, Paul?
I can
So
sure try.
we're going to do something different today rather than us choose the question. We are going to show you all the questions, and you can look at those and decide which of those you might be interested in addressing, which one resonates with you, is meaningful to you, and you would like to comment on. So take a look at them, and then we're going to have them in the chat as well as on the slide for a moment, and you can take a look and decide which of those you'd like to discuss with us.
And, as we start, as you get those, Paul, into the chat, one of the things that really stood out to me, Paul, I love this chapter, and I love that the focus of this coming together is around this chapter because it's so important. One of the things that you were speaking about, Paul, the bridge, those bridges that we need to make. And we talk often about bridges not being just one person connected to another, but it's multiple people connected within one organization and another organization. And then that those bridges are deep, that it's not as simple, yeah, I know who that person is, but I have a relationship with that person. There is trust. And so one of the things that we're doing with HRC is we're really seeking to build wide and deep bridges so that the trust is there so that we can truly work collaboratively where there's that intersection of the work that we're doing.
Would it help to take the slides down?
I don't, oh, is it in the chat now?
Should be.
It is not in the chat.
Ooh. Well, that's interesting because it shows up
There.
in mine.
You might not have hit enter. So I just put a picture of it into the chat.
Great.
Oh,
Thanks,
and Paul's
Denise.
just landed as
Of
well.
course, I forgot to hit
Oh,
Yeah.
there. Now we can look at each other and talk. And as a reminder, those 4 roles of leadership, do you have those in front of you, Paul? Catalyzing was one. I think connecting was another. I can pull it up here in my book too.
Catalyzing, facilitating, weaving, and coordination.
There you go. When you think about those, which of those kind of are natural to you, or which of those do you think would be something that you're going to want to develop?
Just in the conversation that Jeff and I had yesterday, I have 3 people that I'm going to send introduction emails out to him, and he's going to do the same for me. So that's where when you connect and you can understand who these individuals are and, oh my goodness, who's in my network that I need and want to connect you to. That's weaving.
Well, and also realizing that your network is not just your network, and Denise, your network might not be the one that I need. It might be somebody in your network that's, it's all so spread out. It's just crazy. It's taken me sometimes 4 connections to get to the person that actually does the thing or, whatever you're doing. So yeah, you never know. So take every call is the moral of the story. Take every call, talk to every person. Yeah. Cause you never know.
Yeah. And on the way, if that's not the person you're looking for right away, it might be somebody that you realize you want to connect to somebody else.
Yep. Always add them to your phone. Always keep them in your network. Never burn a bridge. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and along with that recognition that we might know somebody by the role they currently are holding or whatever it is that they specifically share, but there are layers to who every individual is. So you never really know when something may connect, or you might have a question and offering of them that you didn't think that they would be interested in, but it's exactly what they're looking for. So being willing to extend that offer and take a no, I hope for a yes.
Well, and as an example, for the last 6 to 8 months, every meeting I've ever gone to, and I didn't mean to do it in this one, but by default, I guess I will. Every networking meeting, every person I've met, just about over the last 6 to 8 months, I have asked the same question. because I know that this country is about 3 degrees of separation from anybody, and the world is about 6, right? So if you ask enough people to meet somebody, you're probably going to meet them eventually. And the person I am dying to meet for multiple reasons that I won't get into now, if we can talk more about it later, but Danny Bonaducci.
Oh,
I am putting the word out everywhere because he was recently diagnosed with the same condition I was born with, and so I want to connect with him. And so because he's having a rough go of it, at 60 whatever years old, he's just now being diagnosed, and I was born with it. I got 47 years of experience here, so we'll see what we can help each other with, but you never know until you put it out there.
Yeah.
So
You have more
Partridge
chance of
Family,
meeting him
right?
than Taylor
Partridge
Swift.
Family, exactly. Little redhead kid from Partridge Family. Yep. Yeah.
sorry, Paul, I
okay.
talked
So-
over you.
Sorry.
Jeff, you have more chance of meeting him than you do Taylor Swift, so go for it.
Well, good, because I don't want to meet Taylor Swift. So
Uh-oh.
that's perfect. Yeah, she's got enough fans. I don't need to be one of hers. So it's okay. It's okay. I don't feel bad about that.
I like the question, what would it look or feel like to let go of control and emphasize greater levels of trust and self-organization in your work? Of course, that one always lands me into the healthcare sphere. And the last place I worked at, we were very hierarchical. And my boss would not let me go to anybody who was above her. I had to go directly to her. And if she said no, it was no. And to me, it's that, how do we let go and trust that individuals within an organization can connect with anybody else, and you just never know where that may go.
What's emerged
Lisa.
for me is that sense, as you said, Denise, of working in healthcare or being a part of a healthcare system is so immersed in hierarchy and that mindset. It's about changing the minds and hearts of people to know that it's safe to have this network of change that we want to create.
Thank you, Lisa.
That sounded like the voice of experience to me.
I think that's the one that also, that's the one that also picked up on Denise. Just to introduce myself, I'm from the UK and met Denise a few weeks ago, and I'm interested in healthcare, but I'm also looking at how we develop a network in a similar way. We're interested in how we make organizations more human and humane. And so we face some of the challenges and considerations you do. And in setting that group up, one of the things I had to think about myself was what type of leadership does it need, not what type of leadership do I want to give. And it's different to the types I've done before. And so I had to really think about that. And just, I congratulate you on all the work you're doing under HRC. I think you've got a very clear vision and probably the most compelling explanation of that I've seen from many times. And I think probably that clarity of vision is what gives trust. If we really spend time understanding what the mission is and what that looks like at strategic level and operational level, you can have trust that whatever people do will build towards that. I think when it's vague or ambiguous, that's when trust gets tested, because you get unintended consequences from that. So I think and I guess as leaders, we have to give trust before we can ask for it back.
Absolutely.
And David, to build off of that, if you've given trust, meaning autonomy for somebody to do something, and they make a mistake, that doesn't mean you can't trust them, right? And so often we pull back and now we say, well, we cannot give you that, instead of looking at that as a opportunity for their learning and growth and the continuation of trust, to trust that they were trying their best. They intended to do this correctly.
Yeah. And I think you have to, one of the things we have to be very careful of, I think, is being self-aware that we don't apply different standards to other people. I did some work in the crisis sector and looking at how you join professional and volunteers together, which has a parallel, I guess, in healthcare, that we have professional health providers, but community-based health as well. And what we found is that as professionals, as soon as a volunteer made a mistake, it was a justification for we can't trust them, told you that we shouldn't use them. Yeah, as professionals, we make mistakes, and it will happen in the healthcare. And sadly, there are bad outcomes from that. But we hold others to a different standard and then use that as a justification to say, shouldn't let them involved. And actually, I think it's about, if we're learning, what's the 10-year vision and what mistakes we'll make on the way, because we all do. And having that acceptance that we're all working to the same aim, and giving each other latitude to get there.
And part of that too is, rather than blaming an individual, looking at the system that supports that individual and what change can you make in the system, right? To support that individual, be they volunteer or professional. That's something that at least some healthcare organizations are working on, but I had the opportunity to kind of survey those organizations in Minnesota. And as much as they think they're on the forefront of that, not everybody has a very robust program in terms of that. So we need to keep working on it.
And Dawn, I would add that goes back to that polarity, the tension between individual and whole, part and whole, individual and collective, of knowing that this work involves both.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think when I look at the different network leadership roles, I enjoy the catalyzing a lot in terms of new vision, establishing a vision, but I find that with different people, I need all 4 roles. It depends on where they're coming from or where the project is at. So I find it's a real balance back and forth. You have to be able to adapt to all the roles as needed.
That's a really good point, Virgil. How do you identify which is needed or if multitudes are needed?
Well, if you're crafting a vision, there may be folks that are kind of still stunned or dealing with the vision of where it's going. And so they may have capabilities better in the area of fostering connections, or I need to connect them with someone else, or they're into the details possibly of the organizing the network internal systems. Kind of all depends on what their specialty is. And it's kind of, how do you find that out? By conversation, communicating, collaborating with them. You'll get the sense of where they come from.
Again, deepening relationship.
Yeah. And building the trust, as you've been talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
When you think about those different roles, is there one of those that you feel like you really haven't been able to flex previously? And this isn't just for Virgil, but for anybody, which of those might be something that's going to be a new muscle to flex if you're working with a network rather than in more of a hierarchy?
I think the catalyzing, I mean, if there was one, strength or one leadership role that I wish I was more effective with, it would definitely be the catalyzing part. I mean, I love this, book club concept. I love, what HRC is doing, what Medicine Forward's doing, what Kern National Network is doing. I think, they're all wonderful programs, but just trying to, expand, catalyze other people that aren't involved, and then even catalyzing the people that are involved, to do more. I think that, that's one thing that, I wish I had a better opportunity, better strength to do. So.
I love that, Daniel, because the first thing is that self-awareness, right? Being able to recognize in ourselves, and then how do we start to strengthen that? I know myself in my initial leadership struggles, straight out of college, I was put in a leadership role. I've often said there needs to be a 12-step program for me to go back and amend with those poor people I was trying to lead. But how do we help people to identify, have that awareness without shame attached, just awareness that I didn't know what I didn't know? And how do we help them to develop those skills or the competencies if it's something they truly want and or need to in the role that they're holding? So Daniel, when you're identifying that's something that you wish, it's then, now how do I develop that skill set and move it towards competence if that's something that I really feel I need to be able to do? And I say it that way because I don't think we all have to be strong in everything, but it's how do we balance? I think about the work that Dawn and I do together. We both have these strengths, and it's this lovely balance to be able to do this.
Yeah. And no, I agree with you. And it's not that, I guess for me, I don't want it to be misinterpreted as, I want the ability to lead people by catalyzing them. It's more, with my experience in medicine, with my former, colleagues in practice, physicians and others, there's a very small group that I believe that are kind of, abusing the system or, guiding the system in the incorrect direction. I think that, there's a significant number that are well aware of what's going on, but, are complacent because of, their own personal interests. And I guess when I think about catalyzing people is, being able to communicate in a way, that they understand, the significance of their inaction and how being complacent with the current system, I mean, obviously they're not guilty by complacent. I'm not suggesting that, but I mean, that's, something that in my opinion, needs to be changed. But how do you catalyze them, without offending them, you know, and ending up in a situation where you've isolated yourself from them because of, you know, things that you've said. So if that, hopefully that makes sense.
You know, Daniel, you're reminding me that those of us who are in HRC all got here through pain. All of us got hurt along the way. Me personally, I got into medical leadership position about 3 years into practice, and then had many, many, many different medical leadership positions. And over time, everything I touched didn't work. And that's how you get led to systemic thinking. When nothing you do works, it's because the system doesn't work. And so what you've prompted me to think about is the razor's edge. The growth edge is where you don't piss off your boss enough to get fired, but piss him off enough to make him think. And walking on the razor's edge is how you grow personally. And personal growth inside of an organization is going to help. And sometimes you can't grow inside the organization. It's time to call time out and leave. And people are doing that in large numbers these days because these organizations are not working.
Grace, I see you
He
dropped a
smiles and
comment.
nods as if this might have happened somewhere else with someone else.
I agree. Do you want to go ahead, Grace? I just was commenting that I had the same painful experience as a nurse leader and now do executive and leadership coaching. And the reason is I felt like I had more agency to be able to help change and sustain developing others because of from the outside in. But to get back to the point of agency, I feel like oftentimes when working in systems, people feel that, and I'm making generalization, that it's not changing and they've witnessed things staying stagnant or not changing in the right direction. So they are leaving. And so that's a sense of that, what do I have control over? And it's such a big problem. I can't, as one person, change. And when you see things from a different lens to know that you do have agency to change, I think that's where we can have that razor's edge, as Paul said.
Grace, I'm going to read your comment. I understand Sleeping Human is there with you, but I want to make sure that this gets on the video. So you say, I see many people interested and caring about the vision, but don't see how they can plug in. Alternatively, some leaders cannot stop working in the job versus on the job, and a job can be a project, to be visionary and guide others to plug in. Yeah. I think you're right. And I think many leaders in healthcare, especially if they've risen up in the ranks, it's easy to keep working in because that's what they've done. It's hard to know how to get to that next level and take on the leadership perspective instead of the technical.
You know, I think networks ultimately are relationships. And even in environments where there's a lot of fear of stepping outside the lines or upsetting somebody else, you can still work on developing a series of individual relationships that can sometimes allow you to accomplish more than might appear to be permissible or acceptable or invited. And in any kind of work that we do, the ability for us to be able to create a safe space for each other, to allow that trust to develop, is what's going to create those opportunities for playing those different roles, for collaborating, for catalyzing, and so much in hierarchical structure is based on fear of saying the wrong thing and suffering the consequences. So if you know that going in and you aren't just leaving the organization, you have to find ways to work around it while working inside it. And I think it's very challenging, but that's why I think a book like Impact Networks is very revealing about ways that you can think about that differently, even as we think about what networks are.
Yeah, there was a quote in the book. It's actually not chapter 4, it's chapter 2, but it's from Buckminster Fuller, and it says, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." And I think that speaks to the challenges of creating meaningful, sustainable change within a hierarchical organization. I don't think, at least me personally, the obvious role for me to follow within a corporation within the healthcare system is to be chief medical officer. And I have no intention of doing that. I mean, I don't want to, make the decisions that I would have to make in order just to get the job, much less keep the job. So, I mean, for me, what makes the book most interesting is this, relational mindset, relational organization structure and network mindset, I think really lends itself to more of, kind of like an entrepreneurial revolution within healthcare. And it's something, I definitely a big advocate for and looking for ways to execute that vision. But yeah, I don't think, I think a lot of the solutions that others have come up with are dependent on hierarchical organizations. And I think because the solutions are based on hierarchical organizations like the government, I think they're doomed to fail. And so I think personally, that's why I love the book is, I think it really lends credit to more, a sustainable change is going to come through some sort of grassroots relational organization.
And kind of back to Grace's point, part of the purpose of the network is to help people find where they want to plug in, help make those connections and, hold events where people who have a passionate about a certain topic come together and meet and, have generative conversations and who knows what will emerge. That's part of the beauty of the network.
There's also a need for a clarifying narrative. Every organization's got a narrative about itself, and they're usually completely wrong. But finding a truth-telling narrative that's different can really help move things forward. And it means having to deeply think about it and then articulate something. And I've found myself in my old age actually surprised to discover that I'm pretty good at sloganeering. So the slogan I'd pull out of the book, I already put up on a slide. Networks grow at the speed of trust. And that's critical to me. And understanding things fairly simply in small bullet points is about all this little human can do. And yet, if you're a lobbyist for a legislator, you get like 1 minute to talk to them and 3 bullet points, and that's all you get to do. And that's what's going to make the argument. So back in your own organizations, maybe it's about telling a story, make a different narrative, and make it pithy and concise so that it absolutely sticks. And as a result, I got a reputation as a family doc as being the guy who tells stories. In fact, patients would come in and say, I didn't get a story. What's wrong with me today? Because a story would be about something you're really going to remember about how do you take care of this problem. So, we all have skills we don't even know we have. Like, it may be obvious, but this is the first Zoom meeting where I've been one of the managers of the Zoom meeting ever. And, sharing my screen, that's new to me. It's a see one, do one, and then it's the encouragement of my peers to say, come on, I'm busy, you can do this. And me saying, well, if you trust me to do it, I guess I actually can. So there you go. Just try something new.
Grace in the chat identified Simon Sinek. And if you don't know who Simon Sinek is, highly recommend. Yes. Has a couple great TED Talks. And Grace, you dropped a YouTube. It might be the same one that I found when I was searching for his TED Talk. But that is an exceptional one. Yes. Starting with your why. In chapter 4, because I'm on the Kindle, I can't tell you which page perhaps it is, but he says entrepreneurial actions to advance the work of a network are celebrated. And we're kind of talking about entrepreneurship here. And he then says, as long as they're done transparently, collaboratively, and in alignment with purpose and principle. And that aligns with why we are really just resonant with this book that David has written, because we do believe in low hierarchy. We believe that each person who connects with us is a leader. So whether it's within an organization or it's they themselves, they're the leader. And we're seeking to empower them to be able to find their people, their tribe within this network, to be able to carry what their purpose is, what they're seeking to create in the process of reinventing healthcare. And so, yes, it's entrepreneurial actions, most definitely. But let's also not hold it tight to our chest, but let's be transparent and collaborative as we move forward.
And that's going to be challenging for some people. But that's what we hope to support and generate and inspire.
It's
Hey,
a segue
Paul.
on top of what Denise just said. We actually assume that because you chose to this book and this meeting to show up, that you are identifying yourself as a leader.
Mm.
And, you know, we are the solution we've been waiting for.
Right.
There's the slogan that goes with that.
Well, even if you don't see yourself as a leader, you're almost by definition, you've self-selected yourself as a change maker, somebody who's or a ruckus maker, as sometimes we call it, somebody who's really going beyond the stepping outside of it and looking at it from afar and maybe being unhappy about it, but not really taking that extra step. It's like, you know, I mean, we're in a political season. I'm not going to make any political comments, but it just kind of brings to mind the difference between people who worry about how certain things will turn out and people who may also be worried, but decide they're going to take an action to do what they can to have an impact. And I, you know, we can apply that to so many places in our lives. And I think this is just another illustration of an environment of people who have at least reached the stage where status quo isn't good enough, where standing by and just letting it be what it is isn't acceptable anymore. Also, I'm just going to pivot for just a second here, Paul. You're the self-proclaimed storyteller, so I'm going to kind of pitch this one to you. But Belize had put a comment in the chat where she says, "I'm getting stuck on the word trust. I would appreciate if you have examples on this from your network, meaning our work, I guess, with HRC over the time that we've been together in terms of how we think about trust and how we try to cultivate it or at least create a space where it can emerge." So I don't know if you have any stories that come to mind, and if you don't, somebody else probably does, but I just wanted to give you first dibs on it.
The hard thing about that is that that's not actually the way my brain works. When confronted with the need to do something, it doesn't actually pop into view. It's when I'm not thinking about it that it comes to mind.
Okay.
And that's strange, but I think that we all have that capacity because you're thinking outside your own box and you're making connections to things that don't actually belong where you are. And yet those are the connections that allow you to move things in a different direction.
Well, one of the things that I've found for myself, and I'm just speaking for Lonnie, but you can help impact or create an environment of trust when you're willing to reveal yourself.
Right, vulnerability.
You're willing to be open, where you're willing to show vulnerability, when you're willing to be honest at a level that most of us are intimidated about exposing, because that, number one, it invites other people to maybe, you know, have the courage to do the same, and at the very least, it's like you're removing your own armor, so you're not going to be as inclined to be attacking anyone because you're exposed, and sometimes that will take a conversation or a relationship in a different, a deeper direction.
So now you've reminded me of a slogan that I've adopted. This one comes from Brene Brown.
Mm.
Vulnerability is the key to intimacy.
Mm.
Now, in a business environment or in healthcare, we don't talk much about intimacy because it has the wrong connotations for some people. But in truth, when we're trying to build connections with other people, that is exactly what we're trying to build, is intimacy with another human being. So vulnerability is key. If we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable, you have all your armor up all the time, you can't connect to other people. And, you know, we browbeat people in training, in nursing training, in medical training, to put up their armor because we're going to haze them and abuse them. And what kind of system is that? The one we grew up in.
Mm.
Wasn't very healthy. Surprise, it's healthcare, but it's not healthy.
I'd also like to mention that the trust is not always positive. It can be negative.
Mm.
I trust a person in a positive way, but I can always trust another person to always act the way that they're going to act.
Mm.
And to a certain extent, that knowledge of positive and negative is important to balance yourself out to a certain extent. And, you know, this person, you know, I get surprised most when and I won't call him an enemy, the opposing individual surprises me with a different opinion that's more positive. Those are the fun trust elements, I think.
Now I have a story, Virgil, that backs that up. I used to belong in my clinic to a quality improvement committee, and I was the medical director, and I'm always trying to push in this direction. And there's a very conservative member who's always trying to stop me from going in that direction. And it was very frustrating for a while, but then once in a while, the two of us would agree. And I realized that we're on a bell curve. I'm on one end, he's on the other end. What does it mean for the rest of the people in between us when the two of us agree? That's it. The answer is consensus. So I developed a rule. When Jim and Paul agree, everyone else is going to agree too. And it turned out to be true. So you can rely on people to maybe disagree with you most of the time, but when they finally agree with you, you already have consensus.
Well, you'd already created a bond.
You mean also that you can trust a narcissist to look out for number one.
Those are the opportunities where you create a bond
Mhm.
of some sort, and it can only deepen even better in terms of that trust of one another. Yeah.
And I think trust does not mean that you have to fully agree on something, but there's a trust that you're bringing your experience and your authenticity, and that perhaps you're willing to come to the table to be open and share and to come to consensus if that's what you need to do, or to just know that perhaps you need to disagree on this one. But just because you don't agree doesn't mean that there isn't necessarily trust there. I think I'm seeing some really good comments as well. Grace said we hide vulnerability because we think leaders are supposed to have it all figured out. And that's not true. That I agree. Dawn said trusting that someone will behave negatively is acceptance of that behavior. That's true. What we permit, we promote. Yeah. Grace also offered a link to a poem. Trust that's such a, Grace, you're the one that I think that raised that. No, Belize did. That's just such a good question to raise, because trust, just saying trust, there's so much to that. And so what do we really mean, and how do we get there? I think we could have quite a long conversation with that one. It's a good topic. David, you put in a link as well, right? Trust has to be used with intentionality and consideration. Mm-hmm.
And of course, Covey wrote a whole book on it. So,
Which Paul, where did the quote come from about expectations being resentments under construction?
Oh, that's a motto that I've used for a while.
It's under construction.
Well, so that's you? That's the wisdom of Paul?
Oh, no. My first mentor taught me this: minor poets imitate, great poets steal. So I stole that. I don't remember from whom, but
Okay. It's good wherever it came from.
It's not original.
It's very enlightening.
Yeah, this goes to emergence also. When you expect a certain outcome, you're mistaken. You're only responsible for your own actions and your own behavior. You cannot be responsible for outcomes. There are other forces at work. Like everything I tried to do in healthcare, nothing ever really worked for the long run. But at the end of the day, what I learned from that was the system doesn't work. It wasn't a personal failure. It's a systemic failure. And so this system is reaching the end of its life. We're watching a moribund system. And why do we have a name like Healthcare Reinvention Collaborative? It has to be replaced with something. And do we all have the answer for what that is? No. We have to make it up as we go along.
I'll maybe quickly mention, thank you for reading my comment and talking about this much. So I really appreciate it. Sometimes I find myself getting stuck on those kind of words and stop hearing maybe the conversation. Safety, psychological safety, trust. These are some of the words that keeps popping up, I think, at the like in our lives, in professional or personal. I think when I identified my role from the 4 categories, I find myself more fitting into that coordination. So probably that's why I'm stuck on that. How does this systems work? Especially, Paul, when you said networks grow in the speed of trust or something, I think, and then when we say, but networks are non-hierarchical or there's no power dynamics, I think that contradicts almost, because if there's no consequence, or if I'm not being threatened by something, I don't feel the need to build the trust or ensure that safety. So maybe that's where I was coming from. And but the examples really helped, like in that some of the things that you were sharing. So thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Belize.
Speaking up, because I was going to say that if you didn't speak up during this whole hour, then somehow we have failed. Because this is a safe space to speak up. And if it doesn't feel safe, you don't.
Mm.
And our
But it is,
intentionality is let's build a safe space where everyone can lead.
and it is sometimes about, I think, articulating what you mean too, like trying to digest it. Sometimes after these sessions, I'm thinking more and writing more too. So
Mm.
I think that's my experience.
Grace asked a
Well, what-
question in the chat.
Okay.
So she asks, what was the intentionality behind reinvention? I recently heard someone discuss a similar need for change in healthcare by differentiating between retrofitting, reforming, and reimagining, and all three might be necessary. Lonnie, you and I had lots of conversations in regards to what the right word would be to put in our name. Do you want to share?
We did, yeah. Well, it's a great observation. I think where I see us being is we understand that the existing system that we have can't simply be wholesale rejected and abandoned. There are too many people in it. There are too many people who on it. So the retrofit and the tweaking and the fine tuning and the attempts to improve that existing model and need. And I mean, if they don't, the slide to decline just accelerates. But what we thought is that's going to happen. We can't do it all. We have a big enough vision in thinking about the future, what that future model could be and could include, what it could look like. How that's the reimagining that you mentioned. So we're and if you've looked at the two loops model that Paul referred to, and if not, we can share some of that with you offline. There is an emergent system that is developing alongside of the declining system, so that hopefully when the transition has to happen, because the declining system is no longer able to sustain itself, you won't just have this massive collateral damage of everybody falling through because there's no transition. There's no steps to the next. So I think we're thinking mostly about who are the people and what are the initiatives and what are the reimaginings about what that future version can be, needs to be, and how that will potentially emerge. And doing that while we're recognizing and continuing to be aware of what's going on in the retrofitting or the attempted improvements in the current system, because there are stewards of that system that will help us help shepherd over to the emergent system.
Mhm.
That was a long answer, but the best I could do.
Before we lose everybody, we want to make sure we get some information to you.
Just a couple of words. Every day with an attitude of gratitude is a good day. Networks grow at the speed of trust. We are the change we've been waiting for. And go out there and make good trouble. And come back for the third session.
Denise, did you want to share the link, or is that what you're doing in the chat?
You're muted, Denise. She put
Thank
some
you.
stuff in the
Thank
chat.
you. Yes, I dropped it in the chat because I was typing so much I'd muted myself. Sorry. The third session is on November 13th, and the author of the book will be joining us. So that will be a really good conversation. Hopefully you can join us. I dropped the link that is on LinkedIn there, but it's also posted in HRC. I also posted, if you're not yet a member of HRC, a link to join us. And then there's a third link that I shared, which is a survey that we would love your feedback in regards to how this event was for you and any thoughts in regards to how we can improve, because the whole idea behind these events is how we can best serve you.
And on the slide is the collaborative meeting with Medicine Forward and Kern National Network on December 16th.
And that will be posted
I'd also
soon.
enjoy attending. And this is what the survey is about. What worked for you? What would you like to see us do differently? Final comments. It's our last minute.
Daniel put something really good in the chat. Do you want to share that?
Do you mean me or?
I was watching faces move around. I was trying to find you. Yes, Daniel, would you like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the comment about all the different, R's, reforming. I mean, and I've thought about this before, not all 4 R's, but actually in the context of transforming healthcare. We talk about, we hear different groups talk about revolutionizing healthcare and transforming healthcare. And rarely do you hear anyone talk about reforming healthcare. And to me, the reformation of healthcare is probably the most important, or certainly the most important, in the context of removing corruption and restoring autonomy, restoring the trusted long-term patient-physician relationship. I mean, I think that the current system has completely eroded trust between the three different entities that are important in shared decision making, meaning the patient, the physician, and the payer. And in order to really fix healthcare, improve healthcare, you have to restore alignment between those three entities. They have to be able to trust each other to make the best decisions to result in the best outcomes. So yeah, for me, reform is absolutely the most critical component of it.
I want to thank everybody for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you on November 13th for our final
The author, David
session of
Ehrlichman,
book
who will
club
join
with
us.
David.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good rest of your week.